Let's go to Tel Aviv and say hello to political consultant Stephen Miller of 202 Strategies. Thank you for being with us here on France 24.
Thank you.
Before I ask you to crunch some of the numbers on this snap election, you just heard that Palestinian representative saying how, well, everything's on hold. Does that really mean everything? Will there also be a pause in the violence?
We don't know. We don't know, and that is not something necessarily in the control of the government of Israel. We've certainly we saw a Palestinian terror attack earlier this evening, a stabbing attack, and we don't know. There are so many actors in the region. Hamas could choose to launch rockets in the middle of the elections. The Israeli government could choose to take on operations both within and outside the borders of the state of Israel. That is not something that is necessarily on the forefront in this election.
All right, a lot of unknowns. Let's talk about a few of them. Last night in the France 24 debate, we had a Likud candidate tell us we didn't trigger these elections, but we'll get the last word with the right winning over the center. What do the numbers tell you?
Well, what you just said is the whole point of this election. This coalition was a center and right-built coalition. And what Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Likud party have done by separating from the center is they have made this election, the outcome of this election, an either stronger and increased right-wing government or a significantly more left-wing, center-left government. And so we don't know if Likud is going to win or not, but we'll either see a strengthened, more right-wing government or left center. But certainly with the blow-up, the center and the right are not going to be moving together in the next government.
Any initial polling on that?
Yeah, the initial polls have shown just that a strengthening and a growth on the right, on the potential parties on the right, and a stagnation to a degree on the center and the left. You've seen new exciting parties such as that of former Minister Moshe Kachlon expected to announce and formally join the race, which will eat and divide the vote in the center. You've seen so far very disappointing leadership of the Labour Party on the left, which happens to be the most stable part of the spectrum. It's anyone's race. Those initial polls they're not worth the paper they're printed on. We have a long, long campaign ahead of us, and this is going to be a very fascinating, very interesting campaign.
All right, the right certainly coalescing around the incumbent Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Let's talk about the center. Finance Minister Yair Lapid insists it is not his fault that Israelis are going back to the poll after just 21 months. Let's listen in.
Instead of wasting billions of shekels on an election, instead of bringing the economy to a halt, we could have passed a social budget.
Just explain it for us who don't follow the minutiae of Israeli politics. Is the budget really an important reason why Israelis are returning to the polls?
Socioeconomic issues are certainly very important. We saw the rise of the socioeconomic issues in the 2013 elections, and the real argument that the right is going to make is that this election is about security, that we had a war this summer, we have an ongoing drip of terror, and what the left and the center are going to do is going to make this election about socioeconomic issues. The further we get away from this summer's war, the more likely we're to see the socioeconomic issues pop up. Certainly the left and the center would do much better if this election was about the economic situation in Israel, which has not gotten better under the leadership of Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Now, we saw Yair Lapid and the ousted Justice Minister Tzipi Livni enjoying a laugh in the Knesset earlier. You were saying the initial polling suggests that the right has the early lead. Could the center still have the last laugh?
What we're going to watch for in this election, I urge your viewers to watch for, is what is the alliance? Is the right going to form an alliance that makes it stronger and bigger, or is the center and the left, with a few smaller, medium-sized parties, are they going to come together and form the knockout that will replace Prime Minister Netanyahu? Individually, it's anyone's game. The alliance is what to watch for.
And Lapid himself, he made such a big splash 21 months ago. His party, won something like 19 seats. He was a former TV broadcaster. How's he doing now?
None of the polling suggests that he will be anywhere close to his current strength, that he's only decreasing, and that's part because of two reasons. One, the decline of his popularity. He took on the finance ministry in very difficult times economically, so therefore, personally, he's become far less favorable than the last elections. And with the entrance of another new, exciting centrist party that will only eat away the same votes that he took on the last election. So he's certainly certain to decline if he stays individually. The question, again, is if he decides to form an alliance to bring in other parties with him or to join other parties to strengthen his position.
And what about Tzipi Livni, high profile abroad? She's known as the negotiator with the Palestinians. She was the leader before of the Kadima party. What are her prospects?
You know, not very good. I would say that one of the big differences between last election and this election is the threshold. That minimum number of votes to reach the Knesset has increased from 2% to 3.25%. That's a lot of votes. And Tzipi Livni will probably be looking at herself. Most of the polls show her not passing that threshold alone like she did in the last election. So she is going to look very carefully at her polling, and she's probably going to join another party to form an alliance. That's what she's going to be pushing for, while the more stronger parties on the center and the left, Labor and Yair Lapid's parties, are going to preferably not join in a coalition. She's going to be pushing for that coalition, and we'll see what she does. I would not expect her to run alone for the chance that she doesn't make it into the next government.
Stephen, you mentioned an important point there, the changing of the rules this time around with the raising of that threshold to enter parliament. One of the reasons, I guess, for that instability that's been chronic in Israeli politics is there's such a low threshold, and
Sure.
you're always beholden to minor parties. Still, though, you say, what, 3.5%? Is that significantly going to change Israeli politics?
It will do so in a few ways. One, I think for the first time, we will see a unity amongst three very smaller Arab parties. It's potentially possible that the Arab parties will join together and create a bloc that is 10, 11, 12% of the Israeli parliament, forcing them to be a louder, stronger voice than ever before. On the other hand, what it does is it creates more medium-sized parties. So while it was formed in the sense of stability, it actually appears to be creating a situation where there are more parties that will be required to form a government rather than less.
And just explain to us,
Netanyahu is a...
So just going to say, explain to us, 3.5%, why not 5% like in Germany, for instance?
This was a serious negotiation between the major parties and the smaller parties that took a very long time, and it was an incremental approach. There were calls for 5%, but they were calls on the fringe. The 3.25 was what was agreed upon that could pass the Knesset as legislation.
Stephen Miller, I want to thank you for joining us here today from Tel Aviv.
Thank you very much.